Hey guys, what's going on? What's Homer Melon back again? As always, if you guys are new and you do enjoy, make sure to subscribe. But today I'm going to be bringing you a pretty unique Ultra League team. It's going to be an ABB style team where I have a Shiny Shadow Chandelure on the lead, as you guys can see. And then I have a Primarina and a Tapu Fini in the back. Everything on this team is shiny. The Chandelure and the Primarina are actually pretty high rank Pokemon. I think the Chandelure is 33 and the Primarina is like 28 or something. So pretty decent for the Ultra League. And then the Tapu Fini maxes out at 29 or 24.98, and it was a traded Mon. So I think it actually is pretty decent IVs as well, given that there's an IV floor from Raids, and so it's hard to get as a nice IV. So you can see that Tentacruel is absolutely terrible for my backline, and it only does resisted fast move damage to my Chandelure, so I keep my Chandelure in. They, for some reason, let me throw a Shadow Ball against their Giratina, and then I have a Primarina in the back with Charm. Neither Poliwrath nor Giratina want to see the Primarina. So this is going to be a pretty easy win, and the opponent forfeits. So Primarina Community Day was pretty sick. I had a good time with my girlfriend. Caught some nice Primarinas, as you can see. And I think it's a pretty fun Mon to use, especially in the Ultra League, and certainly once the Master Premier comes around. I tried it out in the Great League. Not a huge fan of it. It's somewhat fun, but it's just so squishy that it just gets knocked out immediately. And as a Charmer, you just can't reach multiple moves. Typically, if you have a squishy Pokemon, it's only going to be good if it has some hard-hitting moves that it can get very quickly, or it has just an absurd fast move pressure. Thinking of something like Shadow Victory Bell, where as a very niche use as a super effective fast move pressure, but that's not something that Primarina brings to the table. So I'm using standard movesets across the board, nothing special here. Typically what I do is if I don't have a very good lead on the front, I will just swap out into one of my Water Fairy types, typically Tapu Fini, because it's a bit better in neutral matchups. And with Water Gun, even if it's resisted, it applies some fast move pressure, and then the Nature's Madness can be used to debuff anything. So it's usually pretty good. You can see here, again, I like to hide my Charmer in the back because of situations like this where oftentimes they'll have something very weak to a Charmer in the back. In this case, they have Umbreon. It's pretty common now to see something like Giratina or Annihilate or Poliwrath as something in the back that I can use Charm to really knock out, and then they only have a Dragonite left, and that's really no problem. Very nice lead in the beginning here. This is one where obviously I'll stay in if I can. I'm going to farm up 2 Incinerates and then throw in Primarina. Even if it has Sludge Bomb, that's really not much of a problem because I can tank that on Primarina, and Charm is super effective. It's just going to farm this thing down immediately, which is quite nice. They're obviously going to send Galvantula back in that does super effective damage, but I am able to get off a Hydro Cannon, which would do huge damage if they let it through. So it's quite nice that they didn't. And then I'm going to send back in Chandelure, and I know that Lunge is double resisted, but they can't knock out with Discharge, and so I am going to assume that they're just going to Lunge because that would really mitigate some of the damage from the Incinerate. That's what they do. And so I throw another Incinerate, and because of the debuff, I don't knock them out. I assume that one's a Discharge. I was right. And then I go for the old Shadow Ball. Let's see what this does. Super effective on Jellicent, does quite a bit of damage, and then I have a Shield plus Water Gun Tapu Fini in the back. Really nothing that Jellicent can do to win this game. I'll just be able to farm it down, and I'll just shield the Shadow Ball, so really not anything it could do. Now we're leading into Annihilate. This is a pretty decent lead. They're going to swap out into Drapion, which is a horrible matchup for basically my entire team. Aqua Tail can really hurt Chandelure because of how frail Chandelure is. And then Crunch obviously destroys Chandelure, can debuff my backline, and Poison Sting will add up. And they crunch my Chandelure, so that's a bit unfortunate, but given that I've seen the crunch, I'm like, okay, well, my fairies should be pretty decent into both this Drapion and Annihilate, and so I'm just going to take the next crunch on it, but it's a Sludge Bomb, and that does more than half my health, and I'm not able to farm down, which is a huge problem. So they're able to reach another Sludge Bomb, which would knock out, so I have to shield that. Really, really bad right now. And then they have another dark poison type with a poison fast move. This is actually one of two teams that I saw today with this sort of poison dark, a lot of fast move pressure with poison jab team. They just go for a crunch, but I can't take it because I'm so low. Then they're going to send in Annihilate. I'm just out of luck. They have a shield from the Hydro Cannon, and they're going to reach a Night Slash, which we'll be able to knock out when I'm this low. So the writing's on the wall. Unfortunately, I do lose this game. And, Night Slash doesn't take me out, but it doesn't matter. And then Tapu Fini in the back has no energy, so I just concede. Horrible lead on the front. It is Feraligatr into Chandelure, and then I swap Tapu Fini, and they swap Meganium. Yeah, that's kind of unfortunate. Not a whole lot that I can do here. I'm going to go for the Nature's Madness, obviously. That will debuff plus do some serious damage. The difficulty with Meganium is that it knows Earthquake, and so it's still going to be able to reach an Earthquake against my Chandelure, so it's not like I can just shield the Frenzy Plant and then be happy. Something like a Venusaur, the Sludge Bomb is resisted, and so I don't have to shield it, even though is still going to do a lot of damage because of how frail Chandelure is. Here, I do just have to shield, which is a bit of a problem. Feraligatr's obviously a bit of a problem. I go for probably a pretty poor bait in Flame Charge. They do actually end up shielding, so maybe it wasn't terrible, but I'm not going to be able to reach a Shadow Ball, so I just have to sort of accept my fate. Although in hindsight, I think that was actually a misplay. I should have shielded that and gone for another Flame Charge or Shadow Ball. I needed to get the last shield using Chandelure and then also get the additional fast move damage onto this Feraligatr so that I could just farm it down and then exit with a Hydro Cannon. And that, I think, would have ended up winning me the game because this is Dragon Tail Steelix, which does no fast move damage to a Fairy type, and Hydro Cannon would do a considerable amount to a Shadow ground type. So I think I threw that game by not shielding my Chandelure. Hindsight is 2020, and I'm not a huge I haven't played a lot of Ultra League, so I'm still learning quite a bit. Another Shadow Feraligatr on the lead. Yeah, that's just a little bit unfortunate. Shadow Feraligatr completely destroys Chandelure. Part of the problem is also that the fast move pressure is just so oppressive on the Shadow Claws just add up completely. But they safe swap a Typhlosion, which obviously Thunder Punch will do super effective, but Thunder Punch is such a weak move that I'm like, okay, I get the shield with Surf, and then I don't think this Thunder Punch will knock out because this isn't a Shadow version, and so I can just go Surf on it, which would knock out. They decide to take Switch, and they actually do end up getting another piece of farm. That's okay with me. I will just go for a couple of Flame Charges. They Blast Burn, which does quite a bit, even resisted. I'm going to have to keep farming. I do keep farming. In hindsight, I think I win CMP with a Flame Charge, so I think I should have just gone for it. This is a bit of a problem because the Feraligatr will just farm me down. I can't reach two moves, so it was kind of pointless to waste a shield there. Shadow Ball hits very hard. I throw back in Primarina, and then they have a Skeledirge back, which Waterfall would obviously be a much better move on Primarina here into the Skeledirge. But I'm still a bit conflicted as to whether Charm or Waterfall is better. Waterfall does have a lot of fast move pressure, but I think with Tapu Fini, I have enough water fast move pressure, and the Charm just really eats at some of those fighters like Poliwrath and the dragons like Giratina and such. Poliwrath, speak of the devil. We've got a Poliwrath on the lead. Go in Primarina, and they swap Nidoqueen, which is a bit unfortunate. Should have gone into my Tapu Fini. Would have had a more advantageous matchup there. But I think overall Primarina is an interesting mon, and I'm pretty interested to see what it does next season. I know that Zygarde complete form becomes like an unstoppable menace in the Ultra League. So we'll see whether Primarina has a bit more play there. It's a cool Pokemon overall. Speaking of the next season, it comes out tomorrow, and I'm interested to see how all the changes shake up. You can only look at PV Poke and the Sims to a certain extent. Like, you don't really know how common each of the different mons are going to be, and so you can see that you have this horrible loss. You build the team and that it's weak to this specific mon, but you never really know how common that mon's going to be. I anticipate that things like Clodsire are going to be absolutely everywhere, and so you really can't have a Clodsire weakness on your team. But for something like a Gastrodon, I could see that being absolutely everywhere. I could also see it being, common and certainly meta, but not necessarily as common as something like Clodsire. And so we'll have to see. It's the same thing with something like Dunsparce. Is Dunsparce going to be on, every other team, or is it going to be something that, one out of every 5 battles in each set you might see? Or maybe, one out of every 10 battles. I don't know, and that really affects team building, so I haven't come up with a ton of teams. I've been experimenting with what could possibly work with Shadow Magnezone, and I haven't come up with anything that I'm super happy with yet. I was looking at the Sims for Shadow Magnezone lead, and then Mandibuzz and Shadow Feraligatr in the back, or Shadow Quagsire in the back. Nothing that really looked too appealing. I think Shadow Magnezone might be taken out of the rogue tier or anti-meta tier and put into kind of the, you could theoretically use it, but it isn't very good tier. I think that Clodsire, Gastrodon, there are more fires like Shadow Alolan Marowak, Golurk, things like that are just going to completely run through Shadow Magnezone, and yeah, there's not a whole lot it can do. So we will have to see, but I'm not super optimistic, and that means that I either one have to really brainstorm some crazy anti-meta Shadow Magnezone team, or I'm going to have to try out some new Pokemon and see how they perform. Last season, I started off thinking that Shadow Magnezone wouldn't be good, and it ended up being top meta. Or not top meta, but very useful against top meta picks. So I was able to make it work by switching around my backline a bit to something where I had 2 safe, bulky Mons, but one in Azumarill really covered Shadow Magnezone's weaknesses, strong into fighting and such. But we'll see. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. It's been your boy, Watermelon. Subscribe if you're new, and peace out.